Welcome, my friends, to this powerful story. Today, we are going to step back in time and remember a day that changed the course of human history forever. It was the morning of September 11, 2001. The skies over New York were calm and clear, but within hours, that peaceful morning would turn into one of the darkest days the modern world has ever seen. The world watched in shock as two passenger planes crashed into the iconic Twin Towers of the World Trade Center, another struck the Pentagon, and a fourth went down in Pennsylvania after brave passengers resisted. Thousands of innocent lives were lost, and millions of others were changed forever. In this story, we will walk through the events of that tragic day, understand its roots, and reflect on how it reshaped our world in ways we still feel today. The morning of September 11, 2001, began like any other in the United States. It was a Tuesday, bright and sunny, with people heading to work, children going to school, and airplanes filling the skies with routine flights. New York City, the heart of America's financial system, was alive with its usual rhythm. Few could imagine that in less than 2 hours, the skyline would be scarred forever, and the world would be living through a moment that would redefine history. At 8:46 a.m., American Airlines Flight 11, a Boeing 767 traveling from Boston to Los Angeles, crashed into the North Tower of the World Trade Center between the 93rd and 99th floors. The impact sent fire and smoke billowing into the air. At first, many thought it was an accident. New Yorkers looked up, stunned, confused, and scared. Television channels rushed to cover the unfolding scene. But just 17 minutes later, the truth became undeniable. At 9:03 a.m., United Airlines Flight 175 slammed into the South Tower. The sight of the second plane confirmed that this was not an accident, it was a coordinated attack. The Twin Towers, symbols of America's strength and global presence, were now engulfed in flames. Thousands of people were trapped inside, struggling to escape. Firefighters, police officers, and rescuers rushed to the scene, climbing into danger while everyone else was trying to get out. The bravery of those men and women that day would become one of the most powerful memories of 9/11. But the attacks were not over. At 9:37 a.m., American Airlines Flight 77 struck the Pentagon, the headquarters of the U.S. Department of Defense, killing 125 people inside along with the passengers. The heart of American military power was hit, and the sense of vulnerability spread across the entire nation. Then came Flight 93. Hijacked and headed towards Washington, D.C., possibly targeting the White House or the Capitol, it never reached its goal. The passengers on board, aware of the other attacks, fought back against the hijackers. Their courage forced the plane to crash into a field in Pennsylvania at 10:03 a.m., saving countless lives in the Capitol but sacrificing their own. Meanwhile, in New York, the unimaginable happened. At 9:59 a.m., the South Tower collapsed in a massive cloud of dust and debris, sending waves of panic across Manhattan. Just 29 minutes later, at 10:28 a.m., the North Tower fell. In less than 2 hours, both towers that had once stood tall as symbols of human ambition and progress were reduced to rubble. Nearly 3,000 people lost their lives, including office workers, firefighters, police officers, and ordinary men and women who had simply begun their day like any other. The world was in shock. Television broadcasts carried the images across the globe, people running through the streets covered in ash, emergency workers searching desperately for survivors, families crying and holding up pictures of loved ones. Leaders around the world condemned the attacks, while ordinary people lit candles, held vigils, and prayed for the victims. Behind the attacks was Al-Qaeda, an extremist group led by Osama bin Laden. Their hatred of the United States had grown out of years of conflict in the Middle East, political grievances, and radical ideology. The attacks were meant to strike at America's heart, to send a message of terror to the world. And they succeeded in changing everything. In the days that followed, President George W. Bush declared a war on terror. U.S. forces quickly targeted Al-Qaeda and the Taliban in Afghanistan, where bin Laden had been hiding. Within weeks, the world saw a global military campaign begin. But the consequences of 9/11 stretched far beyond the battlefields. Air travel was never the same again. Security became strict, with new systems, checkpoints, and laws introduced worldwide. In the United States, the Patriot Act expanded government surveillance in the name of national security. For many Muslims and people of Middle Eastern descent, life became much harder. Islamophobia rose sharply, and innocent people were often blamed, discriminated against, or treated with suspicion because of the actions of a few extremists. The war in Afghanistan dragged on for 2 decades, costing trillions of dollars and countless lives, both military and civilian. Later, the United States invaded Iraq in 2003, citing connections to terrorism, though the reasons remain heavily debated to this day. These wars reshaped geopolitics, alliances, and conflicts for generations. But 9/11 was not only about wars and politics. It was about human stories. It was about the firefighters who climbed stairwells knowing they might not come back, the office workers who helped each other down endless flights of stairs, the passengers on Flight 93 who whispered final goodbyes to their families before taking action, and the families who waited in agony for news that never came. Each of those lives became part of a story that is remembered every September 11th. The world learned how fragile life can be, how in a single moment, everything can change. But it also learned about courage, resilience, and the human capacity to come together in times of tragedy. Across the globe, people stood in solidarity with America. For weeks after, nations lowered their flags, held memorials, and declared that they too had been attacked that day. As years passed, the scars of 9/11 remained. The site of the World Trade Center, once filled with ruins and grief, was transformed into a memorial and museum. The names of the nearly 3,000 victims are inscribed on bronze panels around 2 reflecting pools, where water flows endlessly, symbolizing both loss and hope. Standing tall beside them is One World Trade Center, a new tower built as a sign that while buildings can be destroyed, the spirit of a people cannot be defeated. For many, 9/11 was a wake-up call to the realities of global conflict, extremism, and the need for unity. For others, it was the day their world ended. Children grew up without parents, parents buried their children, and survivors carried invisible wounds for life. Even 2 decades later, the echoes of that day are still with us. Wars fought because of 9/11 continue to shape nations. Security policies introduced after the attacks still govern our daily lives. And the memory of those who perished remains a solemn reminder of the fragility of peace. And so, as we reflect on September 11, 2001, we realize it was not only a tragedy for America but for humanity as a whole. On that single day, the world was reminded of both the darkest parts of human nature and the brightest sparks of courage and unity. We saw the cruelty of hatred, but also the selfless bravery of firefighters, police officers, and ordinary citizens who gave their lives to save others. 9/11 teaches us that life is fragile, that tomorrow is never promised, and that in the face of disaster, we must stand together. It reminds us that fear divides, but compassion heals. It reminds us that while buildings may fall, the strength of people, their love, and their determination can never be destroyed. As we remember those who were lost, may we carry forward their legacy by choosing peace over hate, unity over division, and love over fear. Because only then can we truly honor the memory of September 11th. If this story touched your heart, if it gave you a new perspective on history and humanity, then I invite you to join our journey. Don't forget to like this video, share it with someone who should hear this story, and subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories that inspire and teach us. Together, let's keep these lessons alive and never forget the day that changed the world.